It's 10 p.m. this Friday evening. Hello, I'm Glenda Chong.
And I'm Steve Lai, and you're watching Singapore Tonight. Here are your top stories. The Home Affairs and Law Minister says it is in our interests to do what we can to reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula as security gets underway for the Trump-Kim summit next week.
Now, ahead of that, some arrests. 2 South Koreans working for the media have been arrested for trespassing in the home of the North Korean ambassador.
Plus, wildlife spotted in an area where site investigation works for the future Cross-Island MRT Line took place.
And also ahead on tonight's show, it's World Oceans Day, and a key focus this year is fighting plastic pollution. And our reporter finds out that this issue is hitting closer to home.
Dawn has the business headlines for us, and financial making some waves today, Dawn.
That's right, guys. They've raised some $14 billion, and there were some local backers in this latest financing round.
Home Affairs and Law Minister Kay Shanmugam says it is absolutely in Singapore's interests to do what it can to reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula, which could have serious implications on the region. He was speaking on the sidelines of a media briefing about security arrangements for the summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore next Tuesday. And Tan Si-Hui with more.
Security is being ramped up in Singapore in preparation for the historic meeting between the leaders of the United States and North Korea. Speaking to reporters, Home Affairs and Law Minister Kay Shanmugam said it's important for Singapore to look at collective interest and help bring about peace in the region.
You have a nuclear-capable North Korea. You have American troops in South Korea. And saying the obvious, the US is a nuclear state. You have a standoff between the US and DPRK, and you also have a nervous South Korea and Japan. It's a period of tension. And you have China, which has, obviously, interests. If there is any incident, it will be bad for the whole world, in particular Asia. We, Singapore, will be badly affected. Singaporean jobs, our trade, our investments, all could be affected.
Mr. Shanmugam also said it was a major show of confidence in Singapore. Thousands of officers have been mobilized for the event. Even national servicemen have been recalled.
There are very detailed arrangements. They have been worked out both with the US and the DPRK. And there are many types of threats to think about: air, sea, land. So all our relevant agencies are involved.
And there have been incidents in the days leading up to the summit. On Wednesday, this former terror suspect from Australia was refused entry into Singapore. Zaki Mallah had been charged and later acquitted of planning a suicide attack in Australia.
We put him on a plane back to Australia straight away. The Australian Minister for Home Affairs, Peter Dutton, said, and I quote, "He's an attention seeker," when speaking about Zaki Mallah, and Singapore won't cop idiots like that.
On Thursday, the police arrested 2 South Korean media personnel for allegedly trespassing into the home of the North Korean ambassador. Mr. Shanmugam said the authorities take these incidents seriously and are investigating the case. The summit, which will be held at Capella Hotel on Sentosa Island, has been declared an enhanced security special event from 10 to 14 June. This means there will be roadblocks and stringent checks around certain venues. The authorities warned that traffic disruptions are expected. The area around Sentosa Gateway could be affected from 12 to 13 June. And traffic delays could occur in other areas, such as around St. Regis Hotel from 9 to 14 June, and around Shangri-La Hotel from 10 to 14 June. There will also be road closures at Tomlinson Road and part of Tanglin Road. And vehicular traffic will be reversed along Cascaden Road in the direction of Orchard Road and along Ardmore Park in the direction of Draycourt Drive. Auxiliary police officers from Certis Cisco are among those who will perform traffic management and crowd control.
The South Korean community here have also begun their own preparations to mark the summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un next week. And as Vanessa Lim finds out, they're hoping the meeting will pave the way for eventual reunification.
Choi Nam-suk was 15 years old when she found out that her mother was from North Korea. She tells me that her mom, who is now 87 years old, had kept it a secret for nearly 2 decades. Now the family travels to Panmunjom every year, hoping to catch a glimpse of their North Korean relatives. Located in the Korean demilitarized zone, the village is the only place where North and South Korean forces stand face to face. But a historic meeting between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, set to take place next week, has raised hopes of reunification.
She missed her family so much, and then she tried to find her father and brothers, but she couldn't make it. And now she's very, very touched and couldn't sleep well because of this news.
Other South Koreans we spoke to hope the summit will at least lead to greater understanding between the two Koreas.
What I know about North Korea is all on newspaper or news. But after this summit, maybe we are more familiar with them, and maybe next time I can visit their beautiful country.
And they'll be watching the news with excitement together on the day itself at a gathering hosted by the Korean Association in Singapore. They may even wear these specially designed shirts to mark the momentous occasion.
Everybody in the Korean community is very happy to be a part of this historical event. I believe that it will be a turning point towards peace on the Korean peninsula.
The summit isn't attracting the interest of just the Koreans. With Japan being a close neighbor of the two Koreas, several Japanese we spoke with say their wish is for denuclearization in the Korean peninsula.
A few of my Japanese friends in Japan, they ask me for what they're going to talk about or where they're going to do the summit.
It's a kind of big news in Japan as well.
The summit is set to take place on 12th June.
And as the clock ticks down, the spotlight is on the elusive in North Korea. Deborah Wong finds out from businesses here which have operations in North Korea just how beneficial the summit could be.
Guarded, hostile and dangerous. These are common anxieties associated with North Korea whenever the country is mentioned.
Due to the close nature of the country, cultural misconceptions are easily perpetuated. But beyond the politics, I spoke with a few businesses to find out how it's really like working with the North Koreans and how the summit could pave the way for more opportunities.
When we go in with our passengers, so they will think that, North Korea, very restricted, we can't bring this in, bring that in. You cannot say something that is political. Well, it's true, but then slowly they are opening up. Ever since 2010, I've been there. Yes, we are not allowed to bring like mobile phones or even iPads. Now it's better. We can bring our mobiles. Now we are able to make phone calls in the hotels back home to say that we are fine.
Universal Travel Corporation is the only agency here in Singapore which conducts tours in North Korea. But trips have stopped since sanctions were tightened last year. Yet Ms. Cheong remains hopeful that the summit could change things.
They are actually very happy to see foreigners or Singaporeans there. So every time when we leave the country and say, when are you coming back again? Bring more people in,
Likewise, for Choson Exchange, an organization which trains entrepreneurs in North Korea, it takes a little while to build trust.
Once you get away from the differences and to the underlying fundamental humanity and the commonality between all of us, then they're just amazing people to interact with, really.
He explained that there used to be about 50 North Koreans here on government postings and business trips, but most of them have been sent back since their work permits were revoked. Mr. Kim added that the summit could potentially create more interactions between the country and the outside world.
I think the much bigger implication of all of this cooperation has to do more with infrastructure development within North Korea. And a lot of those projects will be tendered out, and that is potentially a huge win for China, who's on the border.
Regardless of the outcome, businesses remain optimistic that the summit could bridge a yawning gap between North Korea and the rest of the world.
We're just getting started here on Singapore Tonight. Just ahead, if you're a serial lover, you'll want to pay attention to this story. We'll tell you why when we come back.
Welcome back. Singapore will continue cooperating with Malaysia's 1MDB task force to keep up the exchange of information. And this comes after both sides met here today and last week in Kuala Lumpur.
In a joint statement, the Attorney General's Chamber's Commercial Affairs Department and Monetary Authority of Singapore said the meeting produced a fruitful exchange of information. Singapore has been providing Malaysia with information on 1MDB-related fund flows since March 2015. And
the authorities also clarified Interpol red notices for Loh Teck Jo, widely known as Joe Loh, and Tan Kim Lung, also known as Eric. Both are alleged to be involved in the 1MDB scandal. An arrest warrant for Loh has been issued by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission.
Authorities add that Singapore does not tolerate the use of its financial system as a conduit for illicit funds, and that investigations are continuing into others suspected of being involved.
Now, meanwhile, 91 suspected drug offenders have been arrested in a 5-day island-wide operation, and this was announced by the Central Narcotics Bureau today.
The operation was conducted in areas such as Bishan, Punggol and Tampines. Drugs, including ice, heroin and cannabis, were seized. During the operation, authorities also raided a unit near Chin Swee Road, which was used as a drug den.
5 Singaporeans and a Malaysian aged between 22 and 34 were arrested, including 2 suspected drug traffickers. According to CMB, a 4-year-old girl was also found in the unit with sachets of ice within her reach. Her 22-year-old mother was one of the suspected drug abusers arrested. The girl has since been handed to the Social and Family Development Ministry's Child Protective Services. Investigations are ongoing.
Meanwhile, a batch of organic breakfast cereal has been voluntarily recalled by its importer. The cacao spice flavour of Ceres Organics Organic Breakfast Paleo Crumble was recalled after the Agri-Food and Veterinary Authority received feedback about a small ceramic-like object that had been found in a packet of cereal. The importer has recalled the batch as a precautionary measure. Consumers who have purchased the products are advised not to consume them.
Well, in other news now, the National Trades Union Congress has thanked outgoing Singapore Labour Foundation chairman Gan Kim Yong for his invaluable contributions to the labour movement. And this comes after the Ministry of Manpower announced that Mr. Gan, also Minister for Health, would be stepping down.
Mr. Lawrence Wong, Minister for National Development and Second Minister for Finance, will succeed Mr. Gan as the chairman from tomorrow. In a letter to Mr. Gan, NTUC President Mary Liu and its Secretary-General Ng Chee Meng thanked him for his keen vision and astute stewardship, which forged a strong partnership between the foundation and the labour movement.
They also thanked him for the initiatives under his tenure that boosted funding for the organisation, which ultimately helped many groups such as small and medium-sized enterprises, freelancers and low-wage workers.
Dawn Tan coming your way with some business headlines. And Dawn, some turbulence ahead for Air India.
Looks like a stormy time ahead for India's national carrier, Steve. It's looking for an urgent multi-million-dollar loan just to maintain its everyday operations. I'll tell you what's going on in a few minutes.
Welcome back to Singapore Tonight.
Yeah, Dawn has the business headlines, and Dawn, it looks like Ant Financial may have earned itself a new record.
That's right, Steve. The operator of China's biggest online payment platform says it has raised some $14 billion. Market watchers have called this the biggest ever single fundraising globally by a private company. Singapore's sovereign fund, GIC, and state investor Temasek Holdings, well, they've been named as participants in the latest financing round. The capital raising comes ahead of a widely expected initial public offering by the Chinese firm, though there are no firm details yet of a timeline nor likely stock exchange that it's planning to list on. Ant Financial said that the funds would be used to develop new technology and boost globalization plans for its Alipay payment platform. Ant Financial was spun off before Chinese tech giant Alibaba went public. The payment platform provides financial services like payment and credit services, as well as wealth management products and microloans. And speaking of raising cash, backers of ride-hailing provider Gojek are said to have offered an additional $1 billion in funding. Now, that is to ensure that Gojek's first forays outside its home market are successful. Bloomberg reported that current backers, including China's biggest internet firm, Tencent, and Warburg Pincus, have informally discussed providing more funding. Chani Vatwani explains.
Gojek on the receiving end of an offer worth at least $1 billion, all to help speed up their overseas expansion. A Bloomberg report citing people with knowledge of the matter says current backers, including Tencent Holdings, which is China's biggest internet firm, and Warburg Pincus, have informally discussed a funding boost to ensure that first moves outside of Indonesia are a success. According to Bloomberg sources, the ride-hailing and payment service provider has not decided yet on whether to accept this offer. And if Gojek proceeds with the fundraising, new investors could decide to participate as well. Now, deliberations are at an early stage and no final decisions have been made yet. Remember, just last month, Gojek announced that it will be investing $500 million to enter Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, and Singapore in the coming months. The move into the four markets will start with ride-hailing services, but the company ultimately is aiming to replicate the multiple service business model that it has here in Indonesia. Chandni Vatwani, Channel News Asia, Jakarta.
Meanwhile, ZTE's chairman, he's apologized to all its 80,000 employees and vowed to strengthen compliance practices. Now, that is after Washington and Beijing reached a deal to resolve an export ban by paying $1 billion in penalty and agreeing to other measures. Under the deal, ZTE will also have to change its board and management within 30 days and retain a new US-selected compliance team. ZTE has admitted to a number of violations, including illegally shipping goods to Iran and to North Korea. The deal suspends a 10-year ban against the firm on buying US components that could be activated by any violations. However, its future may be in the hands of a few congressmen who are opposing the ZTE deal. A handful of lawmakers on both sides of the House are backing legislation designed to roll back the ZTE agreement, although it's not clear yet whether the bill will be taken to a vote. Moving on now, and China's trade friction with the United States, well, it hasn't dampened its trade for now, at least. Shipments from the world's biggest exporter is riding on robust global demand. Beijing's exports in May rose over 12%. That was from a year earlier. But the jump in imports, well, that one is bigger. Imports grew 26%, both beating market expectations there. China posted a trade surplus of around $25 billion for the month, up nearly 12%. Analysts had, however, forecast the trade surplus to increase to $32 billion in May. The strong trade performance comes on the back of sustained demand, both at home and abroad. It also lends Beijing's policymakers an edge as they deal with those tough trade negotiations with Washington. Though the trade row does cloud China's export outlook, as it could disrupt its shipments and supply chains as well. And even if a trade war is avoided, well, analysts expect trade growth to edge down as the global economy loses momentum. Not so good news out of Japan, though. Official data has confirmed that the world's third largest economy, it slid into negative territory at the beginning of the year. This was for the first time in 2 years. Data showing that Japan's economy contracted by 0.2% quarter on quarter in the January to March period. Now, the contraction brings an end to a series of 8 consecutive quarters of growth. Analysts say that the data is a blow to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's Abenomics. The economy is forecast to resume growth in the second quarter, with improvements in the labour market and also upbeat business confidence. Well, that is still intact. But consumer spending, that one, it still remains a drag. Is some of the news that we're tracking this hour. India's national carrier says it's seeking an urgent multi-million-dollar loan to maintain day-to-day operations. Air India has invited bids from financial institutions looking for a short-term loan of $148 million. Reportedly, Air India has failed to pay staff their salaries on time for the last 3 months. The Indian government plans to sell up to 76% of Air India, but a 31st May deadline passed without any suitors coming forward. Elsewhere, Foxconn Industrial Internet has soared in its Shanghai Stock Exchange debut. It surged by the maximum daily limit of 44% this morning, giving it a market value of $61 billion. It's now the largest tech company listed in mainland China. Foxconn has ridden Apple's ascendancy for a decade as its most important production partner. The mega listing is seen as part of Beijing's resolve to lure tech giants onto mainland exchanges. In the US, McDonald's says it's planning an unspecified number of corporate job cuts. It says the move is part of a restructuring drive to save $500 million and boost its US business. According to the Wall Street Journal, the fast food giant plans to streamline its management structure. More details of that will be outlined at a June town hall meeting next week. And that's all that I have for business. Back to you guys.
Yeah, May, thanks for that, Dawn. Still plenty more to come here on Singapore Tonight. We're going for a short break, but still ahead, shocking news from the celebrity chef world. We'll have the full story for you in a few minutes. If you're just joining us, here's a recap of our top stories this evening. Home Affairs and Law Minister Kay Shanmugam says it is absolutely in Singapore's interests to do what it can to reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula. He says the decision to hold the Trump-Kim summit here is a major show of confidence in the city-state. His comments come at the sidelines of a media briefing on security arrangements for the summit, in which thousands of officers have been mobilized. Speaking of security, two Koreans have been arrested for trespassing at the home of the North Korean ambassador here in Singapore. The incident took place this afternoon. The two men work for South Korean broadcaster KBS News, but were not accredited media personnel here. Two other South Koreans are also under investigation. Police have warned that any journalists arrested would not be able to cover the summit next week.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump says that he will invite North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the U.S. if the summit goes well. The meeting next week will be the first of its kind between a leader of North Korea and its sitting president of the United States.
I am totally prepared to walk. It could happen. Maybe it won't be necessary. I hope it won't be necessary to walk, because I really believe that Kim Jong-un wants to do something that is going to be great for his people and also great for his family and great for himself. Okay, thank you very much.
Sir, if you do invite him to the White House, or to the United States, would it be here at the White House or at Mar-a-Lago?
Maybe we'll start with the White House. What do you think?
Just 5 days to go before that historic meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And in Japan, the long-standing abduction issue of Japanese citizens by North Korean agents has again come under the spotlight. Michio Ishida has more.
70-year-old Masami Abe was the first reporter to write about the abduction issue almost 4 decades ago. And since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he was willing to return to the negotiating table with the U.S. and South Korea, Mr. Abe has once again been thrust into the media limelight.
1979年の秋ですね。私はまだ31だったんで、駆け出しのまだ記者ですよね。で、警視庁のまあ一応事件記者ですね。警備と公安を担当したんですけどね。日本海の方で変なことが起きているというもうつぶやきですねを聞いたんですよ。で。だけどそれだけでどんな変なことか全く分からない。一つだけなんだこれはという事件があったんですよ。それが地元の富山県の地元の北日本新聞の社会面にこのぐらい載ってる記事だったんですよ。それは海岸で安倍家が襲われて4人か5人組の男たちに襲われて入れられて、ね、で海岸の松林の中に置かれて、だけどもその男たちは間もなく逃げたと、こういう事件なんです。こういう事件なんです。
In 1980, he produced his first article on a series of mysterious kidnappings in 3 different regions along the coastline of Japan. His article alluded that the victims were targeted to be taken across the Sea of Japan to where North Korea is. His headline reads, 3 couples mysteriously vanish. And the sub-headline asks, is a foreign intelligence agency involved? But Mr. Abe's reporting was largely ignored in the early 1980s. The Japanese public found it incredulous that North Korean agents were in Japan to kidnap its citizens. It was later confirmed that North Korea had used those abducted to train its spies. And in one incident, a North Korean agent who was responsible for blowing up a South Korean airliner in 1987 was trained to speak Japanese by an abductee. The government of Japan has officially identified 17 victims of abductions by North Korea, while hundreds more are suspected to have been kidnapped. In 2002, Pyongyang returned 5 abductees to Japan. Since then, There's been no progress, but their families have not stopped campaigning for their return.
米中首脳会談どうなるかちょっと分かりませんけどもね。最後ですね。日本にとっても多分最後のチャンスだと思いますけどね。で北朝鮮にとっても多分最後だと思いますね。
Michio Ishida, Channel News Asia, Japan.
Meanwhile, in Malaysia, where opposition party UMNO's Vice President Hishammuddin Hussein says he will not contest in the upcoming party elections. Mr. Hishammuddin is Malaysia's former defence minister, and his move marks an end to an era for the party. Melissa Goh has more on what's ahead for UMNO and Barisan Nasional.
These are troubled times for the UMNO-led Barisan Nasional coalition. Its 13 component parties are now turning inwards to save themselves after having suffered their worst electoral defeats on May 9. Sarawak, once considered a safe deposit for BN, its component parties are now mulling to leave the coalition as early as next week. Combined, the 4 component parties, including Pusaka Bersatu Bumiputra, or PBB, own 19 out of the 79 seats won by BN in the last elections.
When PBB walks, if it walks away, then definitely Barisan should just dissolve itself and rebrand its coalition.
The PBB's move came after the PH government, led by Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, filed in court to claim full ownership of oil and gas resources in Sarawak, forcing the ruling party in Sarawak to further distance itself from BN.
And this is a big bargaining chip that Dr. Mahathir will leverage on when he is negotiating whether Sarawak state government would want to remain in BN or otherwise. Sarawak is a state which is rich in natural resources, and it will be able to provide Barisan Nasional to assist the rebuilding of the coalition.
Acting UMNO chairman Ahmad Zaid Hamidi met Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir, seen as a desperate attempt to stop BN from crumbling. The MIC and MCA, 2 largest ethnic-based parties in the peninsula, have also signalled their intention to leave BN. This after their leaders were voted out by the people in the recent polls.
And we will see if the reforms happen and we can be relevant to the political challenges of today. That's fine. Otherwise, we will keep our options open for anything else.
Thank you. MCA, that's left with only 1 seat in Parliament, has even blamed UMNO-led BN for the disastrous showing.
I'm not worried the Barisan Nasional break up because we can see some other party did not contribute anything. So what is the point they stay with us? So lagi baik mereka leave Barisan Ilya, then kita tidak ada musuh dalam selimut.
UMNO's acting deputy president said there must be a complete change in BN, as it can no longer be business as usual.
And we have to be brave to go into frontiers which we have not charted before, because the Rakyat has spoken. They do not mean that they reject us completely, but they need us to be realistic in that looking forward. There must be something that will be able to give them hope that we are going to change, and we are going to change for the better, not only for Malays, but all Malaysians.
But the 57-year-old former Minister of Defence, who comes from one of the oldest political dynasties in the country, is taking a break from the party's leadership lineup. Now, on Friday, Mr. Hishammuddin announced that he isn't contesting in the upcoming UMNO party election at the end of June, but will remain as a party member and help to rebuild UMNO, starting with its birthplace in the southern state of Johor. That, as the 72-year-old party tries to renew itself and redefine its role in Malaysia's changing political landscape. Melissa Goh, Channel News Asia, at the UMNO headquarters, Kuala Lumpur.
China and Russia have touted their close ties amid diplomatic and economic challenges from the United States. The Chinese premier hosted his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, to a state visit, one aimed at bringing the 2 countries closer together. Mr. Xi even gave Mr. Putin China's first ever friendship medal. Both countries also signed agreements to enhance cooperation in trade and investment. Olivia Seong with the details.
Russia and China are keen to showcase their strong relationship during Mr. Vladimir Putin's first visit to China since being re-elected for a fourth term in March. Now, this is also since Chinese President Xi Jinping unanimously secured a second term in power when China's parliament convened in March. Now, addressing the media after talks in Beijing, Mr. Xi said Mr. Putin made a fruitful trip, injecting strong momentum into bilateral relations, even as both leaders noted that during a joint statement and agreed that trade protectionism seems to be rearing its head and global economic growth recovery is facing uncertainties. Of course, this also comes on the back of looming trade tensions between China and the United States. And also as the United States has labeled China and Russia economic rivals, so certainly China and Russia keen to showcase their united stance. China maintains its status as Russia's largest trade partner, and Mr. Xi noted that both of them have managed to press ahead with several major strategic projects and have also highlighted several new opportunities for cooperation.
U.S. celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain has died. He was only 61 years old. Bourdain was found dead in his hotel room in Strasbourg, France, where he had been working on an upcoming TV program.
A best-selling food, fiction and non-fiction author, Bourdain was best known for his food and travel television series. Now, he first shot to fame in 1999 after he published an article on the unsavory side of professional cooking.
Bourdain's death comes just 3 days after American designer Kate Spade, who was found dead in New York in her apartment. According to CNN, Bourdain's death has been ruled a suicide, and following on from Kate Spade, it has drawn a lot of attention to mental health and depression and anxiety and things like that that are perhaps invisible to many, especially looking at people that seemingly have it all, but are suffering from these sort of effects.
Right, I mean, you look at Robbie Williams and then you look at Kate Spade and now Anthony Bourdain, but we're not sure whether it was, cause of depression. But, we're saying that if you have experienced signs of distress, remember that there are helplines open to you. And here in Singapore, you can always contact the Samaritans of Singapore at 1-800-221-4444. Or you can also call the Association for Mental Health, and that is at 1-800-283-7019. And those are the numbers. But what I remember about Anthony Bourdain, about his book, is that for Kitchen Confidentials, the very first one that he released, I remember that you never eat fish on a Monday, and that is because, over the weekend, the markets are not open for the wholesalers, and so restaurants, chefs would buy their fish on a Thursday, and you can just imagine how many days old that fish is, and seafood as well. And brunch back then as well, if you think about this, was like more than 10 years ago, had a very bad name because brunch is where they collect everything that they couldn't sell over the weekend, and they created a brunch menu for you.
Yes, he certainly opened a lot of eyes to the culinary world, and he will be sorely missed as well. We're going to go for a short break here on Singapore Tonight, but still ahead.
And it's going to reach fish that you eat on your plate pretty soon.
Our reporter checks out how plastic pollution is gathering pace on our shores. Stay with us. Nature Reserve, where site investigations works for the future Cross-Island MRT line are taking place.
Well, the works, which wrapped up 9 months ago, had raised concerns among wildlife activists and experts. And they say the potential environmental impact remains unclear. Vanessa Lim reports.
For 2.5 weeks, this area was turned into a work site where a borehole was drilled to collect soil and rock samples. This was done at 16 sites located within the Central Catchment Nature Reserve between 2016 and 2017 to test the feasibility of building an MRT line under it. The Land Transport Authority worked with the National Parks Board and nature groups to minimize the environmental impact. So, a year later, I visited the same site to see if there was any impact. I was surprised to see minimal traces of the former construction site.
Upon completion of the site investigation works, our camera tracks indicate the activities of animals, such as the Sunda pangolin and the lesser mouse deer. So this is proof that our mitigation measures, environmental mitigation measures, have been effective.
However, wildlife activists and experts remain concerned about any further works.
Going forward is phase 2. And so this is the establishment of shafts for the very large drills to go through. How this could affect the hydrology, whether there's impact of vibration. These are things that we don't have experience with in terms of impact to fauna and flora.
Any disturbance in the forest and soil investigation works is disturbance in the forest can affect the behavior patterns of the wild animals and even the plants.
That is why the Land Transport Authority is considering 2 possible underground alignments for the Cross-Island Line, which will stretch from Jurong to Changi. The first is a 4-kilometer route, half of which will run below the nature reserve. The other is a 9-kilometer route that skirts the reserve. Studies on both alignments are expected to wrap up later this year. Following that, authorities will make a decision on the route that the Cross-Island Line will take. The 50-kilometer-long MRT line is set to be completed by 2030.
The Health Promotion Board launched its Whole Grain Weekend initiative today to encourage healthier eating during the fasting month of Ramadan.
Healthier food options were launched at Geylang Serai Hawker Centre. Such choices include mee goreng, nasi ayam and mee rebus made with whole grain noodles or brown rice.
Some members of the public were also given $2 discount vouchers that can be used today and tomorrow at participating stores. HPB said over 11,000 members of the public are expected to benefit from this initiative.
The organisation will also be distributing healthier food packets, which include brown rice to 3,000 beneficiaries. And it's hoped that the initiative would egg on the Malay community to get healthier.
This is a whole of Singapore effort where we like to encourage all in the community, from the persons who sell food to family members to everyone, individuals, to come in and adopt a healthy lifestyle and to take responsibility in what we cook, how we cook it, how we prepare it. And I think this is a start towards this good initiative.
Well, we're going for a short break, but when we come back, a warning about the Mediterranean Sea, and it comes on World Oceans Day as well. I'll tell you what that's about after the break.
The World Wildlife Fund has warned that the Mediterranean could become a sea of plastic and called for measures to clean up one of the world's worst affected bodies of water.
Well, the Mediterranean had record levels of microplastics, tiny pieces of plastics which are increasingly found in the food chain. And according to WWF, the concentration of microplastics are 4 times higher in the Mediterranean compared with open seas elsewhere in the world.
Plastic now represents 95% of the waste floating in the Mediterranean and on its beaches. The group has recommended that nearby countries boost its recycling programs and ban the use of single-use plastics and microplastics.
And today also marks World Oceans Day, and fighting plastic pollution is a key focus for many going forward. Deborah Wong took a dive in our waters to find out what the waves have brought in.
80 plastic bags. These led to the death of a whale in Thailand earlier this month. The mammal, which was found barely alive, even vomited 5 bags when officials tried to save it. At least 300 marine animals in Thailand die after ingesting plastic each year, and the problem has also hit Singapore's shores.
We are anchored off Pulau Satumu, which is home to Raffles Lighthouse. Now, the island is the southernmost islet of Singapore. Despite having restricted access and being 23 km away from the mainland, we can still find debris in these waters.
That's why I'm here with 20 other volunteers to pick up trash underwater. And we came back with quite the haul. This is the first time the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore has allowed divers into the area. Within 50 minutes, we collected 66 pieces of trash, weighing over 100 kilograms. At least 60 kilograms were mooring ropes, and the rest included glass bottles and single-use plastics.
We did observe quite a fair bit of rubbish underwater, particularly the ropes itself. The ship gets stuck onto the reef, and then in order to get free of the reef area, they will just cut the ropes and stuff like that. So I feel good being able to dive here, yet I feel sad seeing like there's so many trash still in the so-called pristine area itself.
After divers log and categorize the trash, the data is shared on Dive Against Debris, a global initiative that aims to facilitate policy change.
There are many things that we can actually cut down, for example, the use of plastic bags itself. But right now, it's not considered, there's no cost when we take plastic bags, and people just take it for granted, and we will just consume more and more plastics, which we would not have any use for, and then we'll just dump it away.
Plastic bags are one of the top 5 pollutants that wash up on our shores, the others being styrofoam, plastic bottles, plastic pieces, and cigarette butts. And these have been going up. In 2017, nearly 190,000 pieces of trash were found in our coastal areas, up from about 150,000 in 2016.
Trash from the largest pieces will completely suffocate a habitat. Nothing will be able to grow. Plastic can entangle animals, so we find sharks and horseshoe crabs and snakes, even birds. Even an otter had an O-ring tightening around his body, cutting into its flesh. Then animals are eating the trash. So they will fill up their bellies and then they actually die because there's no space for them to eat proper food. There's toxicity which is reported globally. And now we have this issue where the tiny pieces are entering the food chain and it's going to reach fish that you eat on your plate pretty soon.
Even in a secluded spot like Raffles Lighthouse, the trash could harm the corals, fish and sea sponges. The message is clear: to reduce use of plastics and other disposable materials or risk damage to biodiversity and even ourselves.
Yeah, there are little things that you can do to help as individuals, to stop using those single-use straws. If you do grocery shopping, then get, bags that we can bring your own bags and you can use them. They're also easier to carry than plastic bags. So lots of easy ways to
little steps that, you can do your part as well.
Yep, anyway, we're at the end of Singapore Tonight. Do bear in mind that the Trump-Kim Summit is very much the focus here on Channel News Asia, and you can get up to speed on channelnewsasia.com, all our social media platforms as well, and coverage will be quite comprehensive over the next few days. Have a good weekend.